Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming down today. I'm Roger Clemens, my colleague here, Peter Pressman and Wally Hayes. If you like a copy of the presentation, just send it to request to me at USC, clemens@usc.edu, and it's free. The lunch is free. Well, actually, Malaysian palm oil people paid for the lunch. Thank you very much for coming today. The three of us are going to address the complexities of sustainability relative to palm oil. And then tomorrow, the three of us will have a 90-minute session, working with colleagues regarding saturated fat. And we'll talk about cancer and palm oil. And we'll talk about sustainability processes throughout Malaysia and Indonesia and Thailand. But today, we're going to talk about this situation, waste management, sustainability, what that means to you in different countries and different environments over the world. Just a brief introduction, my friend Wally Hayes, internationally known toxicologist. We've collaborated hundreds of presentations through the years. And same with my physician friend, Peter Pressman. Peter and I have written well over 100 publications and spoke all over the world on various assets, but engaging in terms of medical implications of health issues, both in nutrition and toxicology. So we're a triad trying to make a real difference in what we do, and based on the evidence. But today we want to talk about these major 6 bullet points, and we're down here amongst you because we believe in being with you, not for you. So we'll talk about sustainability and what we do about food waste. Peter and I and Wally work with the poorest of the poor in various countries of the world. One country being one of my friends from Argentina, down Los Angeles, for which we're grateful. I spent a lot of time in Korea and many countries of Africa. So there's hardly a country that I haven't been in. Where I've worked seriously with people who really, particularly in pediatrics, I'm in pediatrics. So we want to really care about what we're doing here. And then we'll talk about some of the challenges that Wally will address the toxicology because of its international known in toxicology. And with very few people will talk about toxicology at this meeting, so you get stuck with us on toxicology. Then what about bioactives in the food processing? Can we retrieve them? And can they be beneficial in an economical way and sustainable way? We want to be able to address that. It's a very big topic. And Peter, of course, will talk about the clinical implications of what we're discussing today, what the technologies associated with today, and what are some of the commercial opportunities relative to, in this particular case, we'll look at biofuels and what are the opportunities here so we can actually recover and utilize some of these materials. Well, Peter, you want to talk about deforestation?
Sure. Just to highlight Dr. Clemens' introduction, we represent 3 discrete disciplines. We like to think that our opinion may have some validity, and we may have some insight, and we may have some effect, some effectiveness as activists, because we do represent 3 entirely different perspectives, 3 entirely different fund of knowledge spheres here. And we all 3 intersect in our views about the importance of palm oil. I think we can stipulate for the purposes of this presentation that palm oil is enormously important from an economic and arguably a health promotion perspective. I also think we can stipulate that palm oil has been under popular attack, literally globally, for 2 principal reasons. One has to do with the health and the health promotion of the environment and the failure of the industry across the board to properly address the priorities of environmental health. And the other, frankly, is what we will address in detail, in much greater detail tomorrow, which is the health implications of palm oil and the very poorly substantiated attack on palm oil from a number of scientific groups, who have been rather myopic at best in their approach to the problem, and who have executed interesting but incomplete and very inadequate research from which dangerous conclusions have been generated. So we'll talk about that a little bit today, but we'll address that in some detail tomorrow. Today we're going to focus, as Dr. Clemens said, on the ecological and the environmental issues. And this comes back, like so much, this comes back to basics. This comes back to basic science. So we probably ought to review some of the fundamentals here so we all start from exactly the same place. Dr. Clemens?
Thank you, Peter. We all want to look at environmental issues, and it really is a hot topic today. We respect that. Wherever we are in the world, we want to look at that. I think because I've worked with underserved populations of the world, particularly in pediatrics, we often want to be careful and respectful as we work with different population groups. I've been through almost every country of the world, very few exceptions, I think. So I understand a lot of different spaces and customs and cultures of the world. And not everybody can do this. Some people are just here to survive. And we have to help them survive in a positive way. And one of the ways we can do, perhaps through the folks in Malaysia, in this particular case, when we look at the sustainability of the product. So obviously Malaysia and Indonesia work very hard in terms of trying to regulate and be careful and sensitive to the earth in the whole area of deforestation. And they have really aggressive products, in which you'll hear more about that tomorrow, how Indonesia, and particularly Malaysia, actually have really truncated the efforts here until they can better use the land and the water and also eliminate the issues of deforestation. Dr. President.
So just again, to come back to a baseline so we're all at the same place, let's review some of these basics. So the nature of the attack, the principal attack here is that, and as Dr. Clemens has suggested, major producers, especially the Malaysians, have been remarkable in making great strides in employing conservation practices with both animals and plants across the ecosystem that's involved here, across the palm forests and across agricultural practices. We've seen this with our own eyes. We have visited conservation sites and habitats that have been created across Malaysia, and it is quite impressive. But despite that example, very few other producers are following suit, and that has invited the kind of criticism that we're seeing, which may actually be devastating economically, not only to individual producers and corporations involved here in a variety of food products that widely utilize palm oil, but we're talking about economic impacts on nations. So what's the criticism? The criticism is that the bad actors in the space have resulted in significant forest degradation. That's important. Why is that important? Can we have the next slide, Raj? That's important because we're destroying, or at least destroying the equilibrium of hydrological and carbon cycles. We all know about photosynthesis. We all know that's a way of producing sugar and water from carbon dioxide. And it is that carbon that plays so importantly and in such a complex, exquisitely complex physics in our atmosphere. So this is why irresponsible agricultural practices, which result in either excess or shortages of carbon, and disruption of that cycle, that's the devastating criticism, and that's what, in fact, is devastating to an ecology. So, you switch? Go ahead. So, very quickly, we don't have to belabor this, but again, so that we're all on the same page here, forest degradation is defined by these various dimensions. So reducing or altering carbon sequestration, we're talking about disturbed emissions of greenhouse gases, we're talking about, at the very least, climate instability, whether you believe that the climate is collectively here warming or cooling or anything else. The reality is that in this temporal window, we have enormous climate instability, and it has tremendous economic and even medical implications, particularly in the realm of infectious diseases. So this becomes very important for those of us who are treating sick people, particularly in resource-scarce environments where things are pretty austere. And the health of agriculture becomes absolutely critical, which means the health of the environment is critical. Next, please. So we'll give you our suggestions from our respective fields up front, and then go back and try and develop some of the rationale for what we're saying. So bottom line up front, what we need to do, what the world needs to do, obviously on a whole number of issues, is find a way to harmonize, and not just harmonize the regulatory landscape, what we have to do to make an industry healthy and ethical. What we really have to do here is somehow or other enforce subscription to those regulations. And how do you enforce compliance? We sure as hell haven't learned how to do that in clinical medicine. And we haven't really done it epidemiologically, but we've got to do it here because this is far more critical than any medical problem we have. Because we're talking about, again, the fundamental stability and sustainability going forward of the environment. How is it going to continue to function so that we have pure water that is abundant and adequate food supplies, which means a functioning agriculture and a functioning planet. I'm being redundant, but you get the idea. So what do we think about how we can achieve coercion to do the right thing? Sad commentary that we have to use that term, but how do you enforce globally practices that are sustainable? Could we have the next slide? So what we've seen, unfortunately, in the combat space is the utility of satellite imagery and drones. Geospatial technology has advanced unbelievably quickly, as fast, arguably, as powerful computational platforms, AI, and this kind of thing. That technology allows us a very, very high resolution and comprehensive means to monitor what's going on, what's happening, not only the health of the planet, but best practices or the opposite. So one other thing that adding to so what do we do about this, is what the Malaysians have already done, which is very interestingly to combine a partnership between what's going on industrially and what's going on academically. So we have a partnership between the academy and industry, and that's pretty exciting, so that you have areas of education at all levels, of undergraduates, of graduate students, of postdocs, in the medical arena, of fellows, where you actually have what could even be residential sites in which people do short-term research projects and get involved in other educational exercises. This has already been done, and our understanding is that it has been quite popular and frankly exciting. More of that needs to happen. And there has to be a buy-in by the community, by the consumers who are affected and who buy products that are made possible by palm oil. So we're talking about community outreach. We're talking about collaboration. We're talking about industrial, commercial, governmental, and academic partnerships. And one of the ways that really makes a difference is because you have an enormous amount of creative work being done in the corporate space, in addition to some of the best research because of the relative financial freedom compared to the academic institutions. So one of the creative ideas that has come up in the course of discussions that we have had with regulatory folks is to utilize, in terms of how to get people to comply with best practices, you utilize the gigantic big box retail establishments, which are now global. In the United States, we deal with Amazon most often. Amazon, Costco, groups like this have their own in-house regulatory groups that in some cases have a greater purview than our understaffed, underfunded, not so great managed FDA at this point. So by creatively collaborating with industry, and in this case with the regulatory bodies that are intrinsic to these incredibly successful large-scale retail operations, we may be able to say, for example, we're not going to buy this product or we're not going to buy palm oil from this supplier unless there is meticulous documentation, as we require, about best practices that are recommended by a consortium of people who are doing it right. So economic pressure brings people into line. Unfortunate that we have to fall back to that, but it does work. And that is one thing that comes out of this. So there are a number of areas in terms of surveillance and sort of creative approaches to make harmonization of requirements actually operationalized. And I think that's the end of that sequence, right? There you go.
There's your punchline. And here's the punchline. Actually, interesting, as you look at some of these companies, they actually set the tone for what you buy. And you have to ask yourselves, what is a quality measurement for some of these companies? Are they biasing you as consumers? Are they biasing you as purchasers to set what food you can or cannot buy based on the composition or whatever this marketing says about them? So I would encourage you as scientists, you're all scientists, yes? Most of you are scientists? Or want to be scientists? Don't claim to be scientists? Okay, somewhere in there. But we need to understand, this is the last session, they spoke about some of the ingredients. Do you understand what ingredients are? You're bright people. Do you know what they do? What are the regulatory things associated with those ingredients? I teach food law. I'm a professor at Michigan State University and College of Law. So I teach food law. So I'm trying to train lawyers to understand science. Is that novel? Anyway, we could talk about that. But we need to understand the complexities of the ingredients and in the food matrix, and most people don't understand that. They just see a word, and a word that has more than 2 syllables they don't want to understand. In all due respect, we have to educate, Peter's excellent comment, we have to educate the public as well as our fellow scientists. So these are the companies that are really promoting sustainability in the respective programs. Well, what's sustainability? And different countries have different words and different approaches to what the sustainability might mean. And we're representing 95 countries at this meeting. So where are you in these various spaces? And the space where I work and where Dr. Pressman and Dr. Hayes work is with malnutrition. Malnutrition is very complex. And there's so many issues that we could have a whole session. Actually, Dr. Pressman and I teach a class in malnutrition and to physician wannabes at the University of Southern California, because it's a very serious issue. But it's complex. You're not going to resolve malnutrition with a single entity. You really have to seek to understand. And that's what we try to do. And I think in the space where we worked, pick a country that are all affected by some form of malnutrition. And just because palm oil is used in some foods does not affect that. Actually, in some cases, actually, it's life-saving. And one of the areas that we've worked is oral rehydration solution. That's probably a topic for another day beyond fats, right? Well, this is the complexity of food waste. Wally, you want to make a comment about this?
This may be the biggest issue that we have in the developed world. We tend to throw away more food than we consume in places like the U.S. And so all we're doing is downgrading sustainability when we do this. For example, in the U.S., if you happen to have a bakery-type product, at the end of the day, you have to throw all that away. You cannot give it away. It has to be thrown away. Whereas Europe is doing a lot better in this area. They're allowed to donate their leftovers at the end of the day. So this is a developed world problem, more so than in a developing country. And food waste really hits hard at sustainability because we are throwing away food that could be consumed. And not only that, we have to find ways to get rid of it. So we go to landfills or we go to some type of incineration, and all we're doing there is hurting the overall sustainability.
Great comments, Wally. You probably have heard of the city of Las Vegas. I'm guessing you've heard of Las Vegas in Nevada, California, and Nevada, United States. So what they do with the food waste is they feed it to the hogs outside of the city, and then the various companies actually buy the hogs back. So that's how they manage the food waste. If you look at yesterday, we had a wonderful session, and we have a dinner tonight, or is it tomorrow night? Tomorrow night. But during the session yesterday, if you look around on the table and said, how do you manage the food that we don't use here tonight? They actually able to Wally's excellent comment, they actually give it to underserved population groups here in what country are we in today? Oh, Italy. I lose track. But it's really wonderful how it's being managed here, particularly here at this particular conference. So thank you for doing that. So we have food waste, and excellent comments by Dr. Hayes and Dr. Preston. This is a continuum relative to food waste. And you think about, and you can read the slides, but also think about food safety as you look at this. How do we manage that? So one way, like I said, in Las Vegas, they give the food to the hogs and they recycle the hogs, and you know what that ends up being. But how do we manage food that we don't have? And actually, interesting, there's a paper. Dr. Preston, Dr. Hayes, and I review probably 4 or 5 papers a week because we sit on 25 editorial boards, and Wally's an editor-in-chief of a couple of journals. So we read incessantly, and I encourage you to read incessantly what's actually going on here. And all these areas, we have to look at basics of safety and toxicology, at least from my perspective. So we don't understand, and I say seek to understand. How do you understand a food label in your respective country? And does your respective country have food labels? Comment?
No, I wasn't going to talk about the food labels, but I was just going to take you through this chart from the standpoint of a toxicologist. When you begin to look at this, in the farm, plants take up everything that's in the soil. So we get heavy metals, arsenic, cadmium, are toxicological issues. We get into transportation. What was that truck used before? Did it haul a pesticide or other types of chemicals, the cross-contamination? Then we think about the processing. We get additives, we get impurities that come into the process. So all through this, as Roger has laid out on this slide, there are potential for untoward events to occur that could affect when we get to the home. So we have to be careful all through this process to be sure that we're looking at it from the standpoint of safety and toxicological implications.
Excellent comment. I also, as an insider, I worked with Dr. Sokolowski, who's sitting right here, my friend from Argentina. And we also submit to you that processed food saves lives. Because where we work with underserved population groups and malnourished children.
I have to stop you there. She's from Argentina.
She's from Argentina.
Roger taught us years ago that the best wine was Malbec from your country. And so we learned one good thing. It's perfectly safe. We've checked it out over the years.
We do have a passion for Argentina. There's a medical school in Argentina, down in Los Angeles, but that's a topic for another day. So this is a hot topic. What are they really doing here in terms of managing it? So even here, well, we're not here, we're in Italy, Malaysia, you see here only 23% of the waste actually reused. And the question is, can that be changed? Think about your respective country and the various processes of food management systems you may have in your respective country. Pick one, because I've really been there. And we're here to help that whole process along. We're a team of a lot of other people. Wally and Peter and I do this around the world. So think of what can be done. And we're working with the people in Malaysia and say, what can we do to help them take to the next level so we can up that number and maybe retrieve some of these components. Actually, we're going to talk about this. So we realized, and you see the upper right-hand corner, the various processes. Have you ever flown into Kuala Lumpur? How many gone into Kuala Lumpur? Niemand. No means no one in German. Okay, well, you need to go to Kuala Lumpur. It's like flying into Paris. Have you ever flown into Paris? And what do you see? Fields of mustard. It's beautiful. Well, we fly into Kuala Lumpur, you have fields of palm trees. So that's where the source of palm oil. It's really quite impressive. Well, here's what we have in terms of the biomass. We need to understand the composition of what we have. So this becomes a great projects and multiple projects for graduate students and doctoral work as well. So you see where we have the plantation, and if you've seen a plantation, it's really quite impressive how it's done. The various components here, these are numbers in terms of the hectare, but you get the idea. But you see, we're still not using very much of the material that we have. So when it says we don't have much, we have a lot of material, that means we have a lot of opportunities. And with those opportunities, it means we could be innovative how to utilize this material in a better way. Well, this is how we know the bioeconomy of palm oil. And you see, the point of this particular graphic is not to do a quiz for you or give you eye strain, but understand that there's a lot of opportunities to look at the various steps along the way when you're making not only palm oil, but think of all the oils that are harvested around the world. Pick your favorite oil. We're talking about palm oil today. We get that. But think about other oils. Are there other vegetable oils in your life? Certainly there must be. And so we have to look at what's going on in those vegetable oils. And to Wally's excellent comment, he triggered a thought. Many of you probably have organic food in your diet. I'm going to guess that's the case. All food is organic anyway, right? But there's a legal classification of organic food, at least in the United States. And how many people say that organic food, as defined in the United States, is safer and more nutritious than conventional food? How many is safer or more nutritious? Okay, my friends from Argentina. You see, it's all about process. And to Wally's excellent comment, some plants will bioaccumulate. And organic is a stressor part of that bioaccumulation.
I was just going to comment on this. What a great job the Malaysian folks have done in this overall chart. Now that tells us where we can start looking for potential materials that could be used as additives in food, whether it's for a functional purpose, for it's a flavor. But my suspicion is that there may be many, many possibilities, including things that might be medical use. Think back many of the chemicals that we have today came out of plants. How many of you know what aspirin is? It came out originally out of a plant. We go to toxin, one of the materials used for breast cancer. It came out of a plant material. Look at the opportunities that the palm oil people have laid out for us to think about. And I think it is exciting that we have great possibilities there.
Great comment. How many of you have seen red palm oil? Just 6 people will admit to it. Well, palm oil and natural is red. And why is it red? Anybody? They're so smart. Well, see, and most people are exposed to golden palm oil, right? Bigger country. Same with the United States. People in the United States don't have a clue that palm oil is really red. I was doing some work in neuro work at UCLA, a little school in Los Angeles. And one of my investigator colleagues we're doing some work in neurochemistry. He said, Raj, why is this palm oil red? I figured that's the way it is naturally. So we have to look at the components, the total components of a plant. And Wally's right. In fact, over 90% of the medication we usually know, because I'm in the School of Pharmacy, comes from plants.
Discuss a little bit about tocotrienols and carotenoids.
Tocotrienols and carotenoids, and they're basically the forms of vitamin E, and they all have different biological availabilities. They all have affect different metabolic processes. They all have different receptor sites that are transported a little bit differently. So we need to understand the metabolic pathways that goes along with it. So not just an extraction process, but they all have different opportunities in terms of health. And tocotrienols, particularly if you look at infant formula, for example, many companies will use tocotrienols as part of the antioxidant forms, as well as for preserving the integrity of the product, as well as providing sources of vitamin E in the respective products. That's the way we're going to see it going in the future. Bioactive waste. This is a graphic that we generated with a bunch of words. This is chat, and so you can have all this, by the way. It's a public domain. But the point is, the Wally's excellent comment, so we have all these compounds we have in bio-waste, so it's not something to be discarded into a landfill, but something that could be biologically used. And many of these compounds that have been identified actually have pharmacological benefits. So can we leverage this? Can we look at a different process? Would that really instill type of a new industry and opportunities for research? The answer is yes. And we look at the case of antioxidants. We work with my friends in North University of Singapore. We were there just, 2 years ago. And looking at antioxidants opportunities here and what the biological function of those might be more than the glutathione peroxidase of glutathione. We have to look at dose, frequency of dose, total exposure to see what it's going to do metabolically. And we have to put biological systems to this whole area of process. So that gives you some examples right here. So I think at the end of the day, we're actually going to add value to food system because we'll actually understand what's in this biological waste of a food supply. Well, and this gives you some examples, wasted, and because I work with underserved population groups. But you see the point here, some of these opportunities from a clinical perspective, they actually provide you with various nutrients. You're familiar with these kinds of nutrients. And there's a lot of discussion about phytosubstances, phytochemicals. They're not nutrients because we don't know the classic definition of nutrition relative to these substances derived from plants. But there's opportunities, so maybe we can agree that they're called bioactives. They have some biological functions in the respective system, and we know that to be the case. And this gives you some examples. Interestingly, the work that we published 40 years ago or so, we have to understand also the structure. We have to understand the biological availability, and when it comes to minerals, what is the ionic form of those compounds? They're not all the same. And because those differences, we have uptake them differently. For example, is all iron the same? Are all the iron species the same? Just say no. It really works. So we have Fe0, Fe2, and Fe what? 3, yes. And so your body, does your body preferentially absorb Fe3 or Fe2? Two. But you see also there's this thing called Fe0. And for Fe0, you could absorb that without vitamin C. Whereas Fe2, you absorb with vitamin C, and then you have iron 3, and you can't absorb that very well at all. Not maybe people realize. So when you just say, well, we have iron in the compound, well, it's not the same. And that's true for all of the minerals. And here we're looking at calcium. Not all calcium salts are the same. And we've done a tremendous amount of work in protein. And protein is a hot topic today. Next spring we'll get there. Allergenicity issues, but what about digestibility and availability of those amino acids? Are they all the same? Just say no. There you go. So we have to understand those complexities as well. Well, here we have, interesting, we have a number of international guidelines to say, well, we want to curb waste, and these are 5 of them, 6 of them for you. And here, there in the United States, the next series of dietary guidelines of 2025 to 2030 are coming out. The next meeting is later this month and be published in January of next year. And actually, you'll see food waste to be one of the topics of concern. But how do we manage that? It's one thing to say it, but what are we doing about it? What action are we taking in respective countries and various communities? That's what we have to look at. So there's opportunities here with this issue as well. Health challenges. When we're eating at a convention center, it's difficult to eat properly, whatever that means to you. At least I find it challenging. I live in northern Colorado. It's agricultural land. We grow alfalfa and livestock, and it does it quite well. Are we cattle or are we livestock? No, we're not. Of course not. But we have unique biological needs. So we want to understand the biological needs here, but if we can't harvest everything. Interesting, I was doing some work in the continent of Africa years ago. And Peter and I were in Ethiopia just a few years ago, and working with the farmers. And when you're losing so much of your harvest, then that means not only is it bad for the family, for the harvester or the farmers, but it's bad for the people. So that's travesty. And actually, I have a project in Afghanistan, and we're trying to help farmers grow soy. It's a good source of protein, political issues aside. They're helping farmers to grow food for the families in Afghanistan. So that's one of the projects that we have. But understanding harvest and agriculture and soil requirements and water needs, that's a complexity when you have a food supply and for the future. Yes?
As long as we're taking, I think, an important digression into basic nutrition here, but I think it is very, very important. When we talk about all this stuff, as a physician, I can tell you what strikes me immediately, and it's sort of summarized by Adam Dronowski's comments from the earlier lecture. And basically what he said is that there's a failure to put all the elegant industrial technology, all the elegant science, all the elegant cell biology into a clinical framework, into a big public health perspective. What's missing when you talk about nutritional value is human biology and human physiology. That's what we need to really understand here. And when we talk about the value of a particular nutrient, that's nonsense, guys, because the value of that nutrient changes dramatically depending on life stage. So a particular nutrient, whether it's a micronutrient, which may be completely irrelevant as a healthy adult, may be enormously important in a human that's involved in accelerated growth and development. So you've got to look at infancy, at childhood, at adolescence, at young adulthood, at middle life, and in particular in the older adult segment, which is arguably the fastest growing component of our population, with very special nutritional needs. Exactly, because since we're geriatric and going down, we have very specific requirements, like for increased volumes of Malbec, but which is actually a great skeletal muscle relaxant. But the point here is that what one of the messages that we would like to communicate, and I in particular would like to communicate, is you got to see this in terms of the variabilities here. Good medical nutrition is all about not only a thorough understanding of structure-function relationships, but you've got to know who the host is, who the patient is, who the consumer is. Is it an athlete, or is it, a 100-year-old grandma? This changes the impact and the nutritional value of what we're doing, and it also elevates any nutritional recommendations we have to a much higher and more efficacious point, because we're doing it from what we now call precision medicine or personalized medicine. And when we talk about the area of medical nutrition, those terms are all over the medical nutrition literature. Personalized nutrition. I mean, it goes back to what we talked about initially, what Dr. Clemens said. We're all different, but we're all the same. Dr. Hayes talked to me earlier this morning about another level of human complexity, human biology. We now know that there are extraordinary numbers of polymorphisms, of isoforms of genes which regulate proteins and pathways, metabolic pathways that are very different from one person to another, so that the degradation products from metabolism of a particular nutrient may be very different in Dr. Clemens as compared with me. Because of our clinal variations in gene frequencies, we need to look at polymorphisms. We need to be aware of it, and we can economically and effectively screen people, by the way. This has been done for various drugs at this point, and it needs to be done for food as well, especially when we're making lifestyle recommendations and, dare I say, lifestyle prescriptions.
I think we're supposed to finish it too, but I'd like to leave with you, I can't remember the slide, but was it 65% food waste in the United States? Yes. That would probably feed the 300 to 500 million malnourished children around the world. And I think that, to me, is the issue here. We can get into the details about polymorphisms and how we differ, but if we don't get a sufficient calorie intake, and these poor children in these underdeveloped countries, we ought to feel ashamed of ourselves throwing away so much food with so many of these children out there.
Good point, Wally. Just a few more slides. There are 30 slides. We enjoyed the interaction with you. We'd rather have that than just pontificating. You can have all the slides. They're free. Just call me at clemens@usc.edu, and I'm glad to give you everything. Just a couple more slides. We do toxicology. This gives you sources of the components in these foods that are being thrown out, some issues and opportunities, as you can see here. But here's the toxicology, and obviously this is clearly Wally's space, but it's part of the continuum of understanding what we have when it comes to food waste. Yes, by all means, Wally.
For every chemical that's in a food material that has a potential hazard, there are probably 100 microbial instances that are much worse.
Great comment. And let me tell you, every food has a toxin in it. Every food. Does that surprise you? And that toxin comes from nature, not from man. So if you're surprised by that, see us. We could give you the class of basic toxicology.
Roger, two things. One, I don't know how many of you know what a genotoxic chemical is, but coffee has 65 of them in it, and we consume coffee every day. There's a great, and I think McCormick still has it, a guy by the name of Hill did a risk assessment, which he called Safe at the Plate, and he had a lovely dinner, including wine, and at the end of his talk, there was one thing left, and it was palm oil. And the reason it was left is because it was a good product.
I forgot about that one. Yes, I had that video. He is since gone. But if you want a copy of the video, just say, yeah, I'd love to have the Safe at the Plate video. And I have it as well. We have it, and we're glad to share it with you because he's just an amazing toxicologist. In closing, there's a lot of things in toxicology is we want to talk the ways we can encapsulate. That's a technology issue, and we see that in so many areas today. And I think one of the areas Peter is a jet jockey, and not only is he a physician, but he's a jet jockey, flies airplanes. And so we have to look at these kinds of opportunities. We know many of you flew here from whatever airlines in your respective country, and chances are they're using biofuels, and palm oil is a good source of those. It gives you some opportunities for this. And possibly here, Peter, this is your last two slides. Where's Peter? This is your slide. This is your slide. You have to get
Only to say that one of the most exciting areas that's non-medical, at least from my perspective, is sustainable aviation fuel. So this stuff is remarkable. It's being used extensively now by two major U.S. airlines, by a number of regional feeders as well, and I think it's incredibly exciting. If you're interested in this particular pathway, we've got a reference here that can start you on your way. But it's an exciting area, and particularly in terms of not only doing well economically, but doing good from the standpoint of environmental health and the sustainability of the carbon cycle, despite the advances that we're making with lighter and lighter and faster and bigger airplanes.
And with that, we thank you for your attention and hanging in there for the last few minutes. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good afternoon.